When wars end, they don't leave behind only destruction. Some paintings disappear, some artists are silenced, and some artworks become more valuable than ever. In this video, we ask a simple question. During times of war and crisis, was art truly the voice of the defeated, or the hidden weapon of the winners? From Nazi Germany to the Soviet Union, and from there to post-war America, we're not asking which side art stood on, but who it actually served. And in the end, only one question remains. If there had been no wars, would art still be this powerful today? Periods of war and crisis are usually associated with destruction, loss, and silence. While people struggle to survive, art is often seen as a luxury. But history tells a different story. Behind some of the greatest artistic ruptures, the sharpest aesthetic shifts, and the most expensive collections, wars and crises are often found. This inevitably brings us to a difficult question. During times of war and crisis, did art truly become the voice of the defeated? Or was it turned into a tool used by the winners? The answer isn't found in a single place. But there are certain periods that clearly reveal how art was shaped and directed. Nazi Germany, Soviet Union, and post-World War II America. Three very different ideologies, yet they all intersected at one striking point. Art was never left unattended. In Nazi Germany, art was not an aesthetic concern. It was seen as a direct threat. Modern art, abstraction, experimental works, all were symbols of degeneration in the eyes of the regime. For Hitler, art had to be strong, orderly, obedient, and ideologically pure. Anything outside of that was an enemy. Works labelled as degenerate art were removed from museums, artists were excluded, and many were forced into exile. These artworks were presented to the public as evidence of moral decay. But there was something deeply contradictory beneath the surface. Did the regime truly despise these works? Or were they using them in another way? Thousands of confiscated artworks were secretly sold outside Europe. Some passed through Switzerland into private collections. Others circulated in the American art market. In other words, art publicly condemned as worthless and dangerous was quietly transformed into financial value. Art was pushed into a paradoxical position. On one side, it was a threat that needed to be destroyed. On the other, it was an asset that could be monetized. The losers were clear. Artists, freedom of expression, and art itself. The winners were those who controlled art, and the collectors who acquired these works at the right time, for the right price. Here, art spoke not with its own voice, but with the voice of power. In the Soviet Union, art was not banned. On the contrary, it was supported. But this support did not mean freedom. Art had a clearly defined role, to serve ideology. Socialist realism was not an aesthetic choice. It was an obligation. The artist was no longer an individual creator, but a component of a collective narrative. Paintings, sculptures, posters, all were expected to tell the same story. Strong workers, a hopeful future, a flawless system. Artists were not physically destroyed, but they were confined. Art was free, but only if it told the correct story. Experimental work, abstraction, or personal inquiry was seen as threats to the system. What's striking is this: the Soviet system controlled art not through money, but through meaning. Artists received financial support, status, and visibility. In return, art lost its critical power. It ceased to be a space for expression and became a vehicle for messaging. Here, ideology won. And what was lost was art's most essential strength, its ability to question. When the war ended, Europe was devastated, Art centres had collapsed, and many artists migrated to the United States. This vacuum became a massive opportunity for America. New York quickly emerged as the new centre of the art world. Modern art, especially abstract expressionism, rose rapidly during this period. At first glance, this is often told as a story of freedom. There was no censorship, no direct state control, and artists could create as they wished. But beneath this narrative of freedom lay a deeper strategy. During the Cold War, modern art became America's ideological showcase. Through art, the message was broadcast to the world. We are free, we are individual, we are creative. Museum investments, collector networks, and cultural funding reinforced this narrative. Art was not banned, it was guided through the market. Which artists rose, which works gained value, and which styles were celebrated gradually took shape. Art was free, but it was never entirely neutral. This time, the winners were different. The art market, museums, and America as a global power. Once again, the loser was the idea of innocent art, because art had become a symbol of a system. These three examples reveal one thing clearly. Art has never existed in a vacuum. Wars, crises, and ideologies either suppressed it, shaped it, or placed it on display, but never fully set it free. Sometimes art was silenced. Sometimes it was encouraged to shout. Sometimes it was declared free. But in every case, there was always a force in the background: money, ideology, prestige, or propaganda. And perhaps most telling of all, artworks often gained value at the end of these processes, financially. But this increase in value did not always mean an artistic victory. States won, ideologies won, collectors won. But art survived, often wounded. Instead of carving its own path, it was forced to follow paths drawn by others. And perhaps the real question is this: if art had not been shaped by pressure, control, and instrumentalization, where would it stand today? If art had not been forced to grow in the shadow of wars, if crises had not become the main source of its value, if art had not constantly been turned into a representative of power, would we be talking about a completely different art world today? Or would art still need a crisis in order to be seen? Perhaps the answer to this question doesn't describe the future of art, but the way we choose to look at it. If this video gave you a new perspective, don't forget to like it, and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. See you in the next video.